Hey guys, Jay here. Welcome to another cosplay tutorial. Today, if it wasn't obvious, I'm going to be working on this. This is Hajime's arm from Arifureta. So this has been one I've been wanting to do since like 2019 or 2020, whenever it came out, whatever. So this is a pain in the butt, but this tutorial will show you how to do the entire arm. Before that, just know that this shirt here that I'm wearing will be under the costume itself. I'm probably going to cut this sleeve off because it's really long, and I don't need that sleeve, and it'll make it a lot less hot under there. But that sleeve makes it so that you don't see my arm skin under this thing. So let's get right on into the tutorial. I'm starting this off with the shoulder piece, but be aware that a bit later I start kind of going back and forth between different parts. I'll try to reorder the clips to try and get everything in some kind of order, but I can't promise anything. Anyway, I made the patterns for everything by literally just guessing on most of it, or wrapping my arm in plastic wrap and tape, and drawing it on, cutting it off, and then slightly altering it to be a bit bigger. But most of it is guesswork. I make the top layer of the shoulder piece out of 4mm EVA Foam, which is a stronger type of foam that has some kind of rubber in it or something. And I wanted this piece to be as stiff as possible, and regular 4mm foam was nowhere near as stiff as I wanted. I used the heat gun to carefully heat up the entire surface of both sides of each piece, and use a planisher that I made to give the pieces a good curve, which will help them stay together when glued. To glue the pieces, as well as every time I mentioned gluing things, I used contact cement, using at least 2 coats to make sure that it has a very strong hold. Also, every time you use this stuff, be sure to wear a respirator as the fumes are very bad for you. Once the glue is dry enough to be just a little tacky, I stick the pieces together along the one edge that isn't a straight line. I also made this little inner piece here that's going to be velcroed down to the jacket so that the shoulder piece can sit a little more elevated, which is how it looks in the anime and light novel anyway, and I alter this piece a few times until I get something I'm happy with. Just do whatever you want, since it'll mostly be hidden anyway. To make the shoulder piece's under layer, I just traced the pattern out again, but I only cut out a small section of the bottom where the rest will be just inside the top layer. It doesn't need to be the full piece since it's just this little bit sticking out, and then I just glue it in place. Also, I didn't record it, but you can see how it's a little rounded at the tip here in the video. I used a heat gun on it to soften it up a whole lot, and then I pulled on it to stretch it, and so it looked a little more pointed. You can fix that by altering the tip of the pattern, but I'm not exactly sure how. You're gonna have to figure that out on your own. I also ended up needing to cut down the opposite side to look a little more accurate, and again, like I said, this is just a bunch of guesswork. The final piece on the base of the shoulder is the fin thing or whatever. It's the part where I just cut off the excess in the last clip. There's a raised edge thing there. So I traced out the shape of the shoulder piece and drew the rest of it out and cut it out of 10mm EVA foam. And then I used a Dremel with a sanding drum to create a bevel on both sides on the top of this piece. I also used a bullet-shaped grinding stone that's super worn down, which ends up cauterizing the foam and taking down all the fuzziness and giving it a smoother appearance. And finally, I contact cement this piece to the rest of the shoulder armor. I also rounded off all the edges of the piece to give it a cleaner look, and if I don't do this, the edges just don't look very good. They're kind of weird looking. To do that arch thing that he has on the shoulder piece, I ended up finding out that some triangle dowels I had, if I put 2 of them together, they're actually a perfect look for this exact thing. So that's what I did. I glued 2 of them together, and later, before painting, I used a heat gun to help curl it up, and then I cut the whole thing down to the length that I wanted. Also, sorry I don't know the exact size of these ones, just get whatever you like. Once I had the right length, I could carefully cut the 2 ends into triangle tips, and then carefully cut away the back to make them look right. It's really hard to explain, but you can kind of see what I'm doing in the video. And then if you're using the knife like this, like I do, to carve away at it, make sure that it's a brand new blade so that it cuts as cleanly as possible. I also carefully used the Dremel here to make it look a little better, and I did the exact same steps here as I did before with both tips. Okay, so there are 3 segments that make up the forearm. This is going to be extremely confusing to explain, but I'll try my best. Again, most of this was guesswork. The base, which is the piece that sits closest to my hand and is the lowest layer of the 3, was made, like I said before, by wrapping my arm in plastic wrap, then tape, and then drawing the pattern on, cutting it off, and then altering it to be slightly bigger to make way for the thickness of the foam. As well as I only made this go about halfway up my arm. That piece would then get glued together along the seam where I cut it off. However, I used tape for everything while making all the pieces, just in case, and then glued everything at the end once I knew it would all work out. The second piece of this was made the same way, except instead of doing the pattern on my arm, I did it around the top of this piece, and then again altering the pattern to make up for the thickness of the foam. The last piece of the forearm, however, was the hardest, and this is the main reason that there's no pattern for this, other than the fact that you'll have to do this based off of your arm measurements, not mine, so my pattern isn't going to fit you probably, but also this piece right here was just horrible to make. It took 4 tries before I finally got something even this close. Basically, I guessed on this entire piece. It's in 2 halves and both seam edges are curved, so you're going to want to round them off outward like this picture shows here, and then you're going to want to heat curl everything a little bit so that all the pieces stick together better, and then you can glue them all together. I also made it so that the back of the elbow section was higher up than the inner part of the the elbow section, where it's lowered down a little bit. This is just what his looks like. I don't know what to call this. It's just higher up than one section. I don't know. This gives you better movement as well. And also, all of these pieces were made from 6mm foam. It's probably good that you know that. To make the fin on the elbow, I freehand drew the shape, which I realized later I made a little too long, but whatever, I don't really care. And then I cut out 6 pieces of cardboard from USPS flat rate shipping boxes. So if you don't have those in your country because you're maybe not in the US, I don't know, they're just thinner cardboard boxes. They're just shipping boxes. Figure something out yourself, I guess. I don't know. But then I taped them all together to secure them in place, and then after that I skinned over the entire thing with a bunch of 2mm EVA foam. I then marked where it needed to go and contact cemented it in place, and since the area is curved around that elbow section, I made sure to really mash it in there so that it was stuck really good. And here's how it looks. As you can see, the wrist is still a bit long, so I do mark that now, and I cut it down a little bit later. I also, later on, cut away a little bit at the seam to make it close up a little bit smaller. And now on to the bicep. This piece also took a couple of tries, but I finally settled on what I have. I can't do the same pattern thing because I can't reach my arm there, so I just guess on the entire thing. I took measurements and just started making stuff. I was able to get the shape needed, and again, only used tape to hold everything together until I was sure. Then I was able to get a pattern for the top layer, which is what it's going to end up making the zigzag shape in the center, and you can actually see that in the pattern here. And then I did the base piece in 4mm foam, and the top layers in 6mm foam. After cutting the pieces out and making sure they'll work, I used the Dremel just like before to angle the zigzag cutouts, as well as after getting it all glued on, I do this to round off the edges. That'll be the top and bottom of the full piece. This piece is actually supposed to look extremely rounded off, like whatever you want to call it, domed or whatever, on both sides of the zigzag, so it's like 2 domes with a zigzag in the middle. I don't know what to call that, but that wasn't going to work here, so this was my compromise. There was nothing I could do. And then again, also, I went over everything with the bullet-shaped tip, just like before, to make everything look smooth. Then once it was good to go, I contact cemented the pieces together. Also, it's good to know here, as well as on the forearm piece and the layer under the shoulder piece, that you should already have these pieces in the shapes that you want them to be in when you glue them together. So, like for example, this in the forearm, that means closing up the seam on the one layer first, and then gluing the next layers on top of that. If you do everything flat first, it won't work correctly. You have to do it this way. Also, I forgot this piece. I have no idea what it is, but he never uses it, and it's on the top of the forearm, and it looks like it's supposed to maybe shoot something? I don't know. Anyway, I cut out a triangle shape that has a round tip out of 4mm What the Foam, used the heat gun to help curl it up, and then glued it on. So it turns out I didn't notice until after I already made it, but the bicep piece actually goes up a little bit further on the outer section. The outer side or whatever. Basically, it does the same thing as the top layer of the forearm piece where the elbow is, so I cut out an extra piece with a V-shape cut out at the top center so that gluing that shut actually rounds that off a little more. It looks a little more dynamic. And this is also cut in a way to where the ends taper down so it can meet up with the bicep piece a little more naturally, and then I glue this piece on. It also works out because the wavy look this has when this piece is added is actually the way it's supposed to look. So having this separately added on makes it more accurate looking. I also took a small amount away right under the armpit where I cut a little bit off and dremeled it out so that it can sit a little higher on my arm. You can barely see it and it's not really a problem. I guess I didn't film this either, so you'll have to just see it taped together. But I ended up remaking the inner shoulder piece that'll be connected to the jacket, basing it on the previous one, but this time out of 4mm foam instead of 2mm foam. And again here, like I said, it's only taped together, but I did end up contact cementing this piece to the inside of this shoulder piece. And now the last piece to build, the glove. I started this on a leather fingerless glove that I didn't use anymore, and taped that up to draw the pattern, and then just cut the whole thing apart. I couldn't find my tuxedo gloves, which is what I'm using for the actual gloves for this, so I had to end up buying more and just did this while I waited. You can see what I did here. It's just a plate on the back of the hand that has 4 triangle points for basically a point on each knuckle. It's super easy, and also I will link the gloves that I use for the cosplay down in the description. A lot of them will have those 3 raised stitches on them, kind of like Mario gloves. Those make it super annoying to glue things down to. The ones that don't have that, which are the ones I'm using, are way easier, and they're much better. I then cut this shape out of more 4mm What the Foam, as again I wanted this to be stronger than regular foam, and I traced the pattern out upside down so that I could cut everything out at an angle so that with the blade pointed inwards, so that when it's flipped over it looks like the edges were beveled without having to sand anything. I also needed to make the fin on the back of this plate. Man, he sure loves fins, doesn't he? Anyway, I just cut out a random shape that was kind of arched and then trimmed it down and glued it on. I also cut the edges of this on an angle the same way, except this time the angles aren't facing upward. Oh, also there's a thumb piece here, and I did the exact same thing. You can do that however you like. Now, I didn't film this either, but it's because this is much harder to do. Basically, I just made a bunch of rectangular shapes and kept test fitting them on my fingers, and then cutting them down until I got the sizes I like. And then I labeled them on the back, which ones went to which fingers and which sections, and then I made it so that each one overlapped the next one as it got closer to your fingers, so they would be longer in the front. These are also nowhere near accurate. The gloves are literally impossible to make out of foam because it's too thick no matter what you use to make full fingers and to wrap your hand. You need something a lot thinner, and foam just can't be that thin and still work. So honestly, do whatever you want that works best for you. But I went ahead and taped these to a wooden dowel and took them outside to spray them with Plastidip. I also sprayed them with a dark metal color spray paint thing, but I didn't like it and ended up changing it later. But for now, I put 2 gloves on to protect my hand underneath and spread contact cement on the areas where the pieces needed to go, as well as the back side of the pieces, and glued them to the glove. When doing this, you also want to make sure you press down really hard. What I do is wrap my fingers around whatever piece I'm currently attaching and just squeeze really hard. This not only helps wrap it correctly, but it also presses it really hard so it sticks together a lot better. And the same thing with the back of the hand and the thumb. Also, the thumb is different. It's a little weird. What I did was I made a piece that kind of matches the rest of the finger pieces, but it's only 1 piece rather than 3, or well, 2 for the thumb, but it's only 1 piece, and it goes on the part of your thumb from the tip to the first knuckle. And then the back plate that I made earlier goes from the part past the second knuckle, so there's nothing between the 2 knuckles at all. I just straight up couldn't make anything else work right there. It's a bit difficult to explain all of that and have it make any sense, since my other hand is going to be in the way for most of it anyway. So instead, here's the entire thing glued together before I redid the paint job, so you can see what I meant by all of that. You can see the overlapping of the finger pieces that I mentioned, as well as what I was talking about with the thumb pieces. Taking this clip was probably the best way to make any of this make sense. Also, as you can see, I have a lot of movement in my fingers, and I can grab and hold things with no issues. Now that the entire build is done, before painting the rest of the pieces, I need to tape off the areas where the Velcro will go so I can glue directly to bare foam. I moved these around a bit after this, so just put them wherever you want. Now I can take all of the pieces outside and hit them with some spray Plastidip. I can't get the camera out there much anymore, sorry about that, but yeah, here they all are Plastidipped. The final paint job I decided on was going over everything with a matte black paint, which I only had brush on, but spray paint would have been way faster, and then I went over that with silver. However, it was a bit of a weird process. I didn't want it full on silver, but I didn't want it just dry brushed either. So what I did was dab off some of the paint, but not as much as you would with dry brushing. And then instead of brushing it, I kind of used the brush to scrub the paint on. I pressed somewhat hard, but not hard enough to where the actual pieces of the brush dug into the foam or whatever. You know when you need to mop up a spill or something and you gotta kind of push hard a little bit to get it up? Kind of like that. Or when you're cleaning a dish that has something stuck a little too much. Something like that kind of scrubbing, but with a paint and a brush. This gave it a kind of dirty look that I ended up really liking. And honestly, it looks way better on camera than it does in person. And I did this on every single piece. And yes, even that arch that goes on the shoulder that I haven't talked about for a while now. I haven't forgotten about it. After the main paint job was done, I needed to add all of the red paint details. I started with the glove, since it was going to be the hardest, and I did the best I can. I'm not a painter, so this doesn't look that great, but whatever. It's 4 diamond shapes with one on each knuckle on the back piece, where the longer, I guess, bottom section of the diamond, it actually stretches down the hand a good length. So that's what I did. I also added a half circle on the back of each of the pieces that are right after this back part on each finger. I've seen in some screenshots that he has 4 red domes here, like they're his actual knuckles or something, I don't know. But that wasn't gonna happen. There was no room for that, so this is all I could do. Also, this red is gloss, by the way. I don't have matte, and I didn't realize until it was already about to start. So I said screw it and used it. Gloss sucks because the glossy surface, once it dries, makes painting over it, which I have to do to build up the layers to cover the silver, really annoying. So yeah, use matte to save the headache. I also painted the zigzag in the bicep piece with this same red paint. Same problem with the hand, the gloss finish made it really annoying. And you can also mask off the silver if you really want to, but I'm decent enough with my hands that I don't have to worry about it, and I have a small enough brush, so there wasn't really an issue there, and it was really easy to fix the 1 or 2 spillovers that I had. Then I painted the red stripes on the shoulder piece, but I did this differently, so the gloss didn't really matter. I used a really bad blue painter's tape so that it wouldn't peel up the silver and masked off the line that I wanted to paint. And then I used a sponge brush to dab on the paint. Doing it this way prevents the paint from going under the tape. And the dabbing motion means you don't have to worry about the coverage problem from earlier. Also on this shoulder piece, I dremelled away the paint where I want to glue on that arch piece later. Now I can remove the tape from the areas the Velcro will go and start contact cementing those in place. On the shoulder, I added 3 Velcro pieces, but it turns out I only needed to use the long center one that connects to the top of my shoulder. And the last thing I need to do is glue on the arch to the shoulder. And like everything else, one last time, say it with me now, I used contact cement. Because of course oh wait, what's this? Well, it turns out I needed to use some super glue to hold this in place while the contact cement fully cures. That's the first other glue I've used on this entire build. Weird, whatever. But anyway, after all of that, just hit everything with a matte clear coat and finally it's all done. Alright, a few things to mention at the very end here. Some stuff that might be important to you, it doesn't really matter. I did not use the Velcro on the sides yet. I don't know if I need it. I don't know if you can hear it from the microphone, but I can hear the Velcro like moving around. That's really annoying. It's right next to my ear. So that's fun. If you can find a better way, I was debating actually using snaps. I just don't have the correct ones that I wanted to use. And I was going to use EVA Foam, the same stuff I used for the outer layer of the shoulder piece. The 2mm stuff, I was going to put a snap through that because it's not going to rip. And then contact cementing another layer on that, and then contact cementing it where the Velcro goes, and then putting another snap on the shoulder so that it doesn't tear the Velcro open, so like it can't come off that way. That's a really good way to do it. If I did 2, that would have anchored it in place really well without it being able to rotate. That would have been fine. So I might redo that part. I can just cut off, it'll be very hard, but I can cut off the Velcro if I really need to and then do that. Or I can go right over the Velcro probably, because now it's not a ripping point because Velcro doesn't stretch like foam does. So I might be able to go straight through the foam and the Velcro and put a snap in there. So if I can do that, I might just do that. It might be better. I can't do that on here though I could on the bicep. Though I could possibly do that same thing with the 2mm What the Foam and put it on the inside of the bicep, because I can still, it still has a problem where it wants to come off, but the only problem there is that it might come off. Even with snaps, it likes to move around a lot and try to undo itself. So because of the angle that it sits at, it might just pop the snaps open anyway. So that would defeat the purpose. So I might do that, doubling that with the Velcro. So it's Velcro, and then above that maybe is some snaps, or under it or something to just help anchor it in place. So if you want to do that, go ahead and do that. Also, if you do want to do the front and back Velcro, you can, but that inhibits movement a little bit, but I don't think it even would, because when you do this, the whole piece where it would sit anyway moves with it, so it doesn't really matter. And then if you can get the hand to look better than mine, do that. If you can make it look much more accurate, go ahead. I also have this problem where this keeps slipping down, and I have almost no movement in this hand. So you can see that's how far I can bend my hand up without it getting too destroyed. And then I can do that and that, but that's about it. I can't do too much. And I can raise it up like that, but nothing's in the way there. That's about it, honestly. You could also Velcro this one down because it does move, but I can just do what I just did. I have reach on this side, so I can reach over to it. With that shirt on, I might not be able to get as much reach. And you also notice I cut the sleeve off of that. So that way this sleeve is the only thing hanging out. So you're gonna wanna do that too. I also cut down the sleeve here and sewed it up and put the Velcro on. I didn't show that in the video. I just assume you know how to sew things together and how to sew Velcro on. Do that however you want. Anyway, yeah, the other thing is this arch thing. It's very lopsidedly weird. It like curves weird on here because of how big it is. Make it smaller. Just make it smaller and it won't do that. It's probably way too big. Like you can probably tell it goes off really far, like probably way farther than it needs to. So, and you're probably gonna need to do this a lot too, because this whole thing's weighing down this side. Not by much, but it's weighing it down still. And you can probably hear when I do that, the Velcro is starting to crack. So that'll happen a lot, so just be wary of that. Anyway, again, barely any movement. I can barely move my hand, but yeah. Other than that, that should be it for the entire video and the tutorial. So I'll just end it right here. So if you like it, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys later.